Strategic Hotbox with Dr. Brandi Stankovic. Discussing leadership, business, and how to take control of your life and achieve greatness. From the streets of Las Vegas, energized, informed, and never diluted. It's time to kick some ass.
Yo, welcome back to the Strategic Hotbox. Yo, they're making fun of me. Yo, welcome back to the Strategic Hotbox. It's your girl, Dr. Brandi Stankovic, and I'm happy that you're here. Today, we're going to talk about travel, and we're going to talk about the importance of travel, and in getting lost, you really can find yourself. So let's dig right in. We have a pretty amazing subject matter expert, Mr. Mario Vega, that's going to be joining us here very, very soon. And as you know, for anybody that has been our Hotbox homie for a long time, we break it down to the learn, the love, and the kick-ass. In the learn, we'll talk about travel, talk about the importance, dig into the topic, introduce it. In the love section, that I'd like to introduce you to somebody that I absolutely love and who loves and has a passion for travel. And then in kick-ass, we'll give you some things that you can start implementing today. So let's do it. When it comes to getting lost, when it comes to travel, it really is an opportunity to broaden the mind. And as you know, way back in the day, we talked to Doug Chambers about travel, and we talked about opening your eyes and keeping a journal and sharing experiences. And so why talk about travel again? Is there more? Yes, there's so much more when it comes to travel. And as I've mentioned, I travel a lot. When I talk to different people, they're like, I travel for work all the time, like once a month for travel at least. I'm like, once a month? Try every week. And I travel probably 3 or 4 days a week, every week. And is it difficult sometimes? Sure. Is it absolutely to the core of who I am? Yes. And would I completely internally combust if I had to be in the same office or the same cubicle every single day? Yes, I would. And so it just makes sense for me to be able to be in the field with clients, with people, with you, having different conversations. And so I work that way. And through my travels, I certainly have learned a lot about myself. And travel and play sometimes are difficult, and travel and play sometimes work really well together. And through travel, I've become probably the most disciplined I've ever been in my life about certain aspects, and when I can do things and when I can't. And our good friend, Toby Kennedy, shout out to Toby if you're listening to this one, you're going to love this. He loves to give me a hard time and hassle me because I will never drink at airports, and I won't drink before I get on airplanes. And unless it's like a 20-hour flight or something, then geez, I mean, you might as well, because you're going to be on it for days. But I don't. And part of that is just the way that it makes me feel and the process of the airplane and the fact that I'm on them all the time. I know what my body's like and all of that. So I just don't. It's just it's a hard line for me. And so he loves to hassle me, but I know a lot of people have, different experiences with airplanes, but travel really does create this certain amount of discipline. It's also important to make sure that we open our eyes in the process of travel and life and be in the place, absorb the moments, experience it and live it. And I may have shared it in the podcast with Doug. One of the most powerful things that I love to do when I go different places is blend in. I love to not be known and noticed for being somebody that's an outsider, because that means that I'm experiencing, absorbing the culture the best that I can and getting to know the people the best that I can. And so, you can get lost in a lot of different ways. You can get lost in a book. You can get lost in a good tequila conversation at 2 a.m. Not that I've ever done that. You can get lost in anything. But one of the best ways to get lost is in travel and allowing you to discover more of yourself. And when you're stepping out of your comfort zone, because really traveling, especially outside of the country, allows you to fully immerse in something that is so, so different. Even in Western cultures, even when you travel to Canada or to Australia, if you're from the United States, when you're traveling to countries that are close, or if you're from other places in the world and you're traveling to countries that are relatively geographically close to you, there may be some cultural similarities. However, some countries, you're pretty very geographically close to a culture that might be very, very different too. And that's a benefit that you might have to not go far, but to be able to experience kind of a broadened distance in culture. So I want to share an experience that I had in Brazil, and I went studied abroad in Brazil a number of years ago now, but it was in grad school, and we were working with TV Globo and down in Rio de Janeiro, and one of the days we were out and about, and we were seeing everybody paraglide. And so that's where you jump off of a mountain with the parachute, right? And so so similar to hang gliding, but with a parachute, but not the one from the boat, just to kind of create that differentiation. So we were paragliding, or people were, and we couldn't do it because it was windy. And so everybody was kind of bummed about it, but I'm like determined, I want to make this happen. And so I took it upon myself to get a hold of an organization that could help in this paragliding process, and found one, and just kind of naively expected like a magical rainbow bus of a bunch of tourists in Hawaiian shirts to roll up, like playing some music and be like, Brandi, come on board. And it just wasn't that. I was sitting outside of this kind of apartment area that we were at, this downtown area, and this dude in like a Land Cruiser like pulls up and whistles, and he's like, Brandi, come on. And I just was like, yeah, exactly. That's a perfect whistle. It's exactly how it was. And I just went, I feel like my parents taught me not to get in Land Cruisers with strange men. And so I did. I got in the vehicle naturally. And then I went on to the place where we had to sign the waiver, and the waivers were translated into really broken English. And again, some of you may have heard me share the story, but it's all process of stepping outside of myself. And it was interesting the way the evolution occurred. But I go to sign the waiver, and in the broken English, it essentially read like, if you die, not our fault. I mean, it was really, really rough. And so I thought brilliantly, well, I'll sign someone else's name, right? Because that makes so much sense that because then it will be their fault. No, obviously. Right? Totally their fault. And so, not smart, because if I had died, I don't know what anybody would have done to find me. There would have been like a much harder tracking. But nonetheless, I forged this thing, and I hopped back in his Land Cruiser, and we're heading up the hill to do this. And I'm starting to get like really worked up and nervous over this paragliding, because again, I'm alone with this dude, and Portuguese is a language that is pretty far out for my understanding and exposure. And I'm thinking about, what have I got myself into, and can I tuck and roll out of this Land Cruiser going 40 miles an hour? And, what do I do? Like, all these things are running through my head. And then there's some traffic, and then the day goes on, and then we get up there, and all these things are starting to add to the fact that I've been scared for so long that I'm starting to get almost impatient. And for anybody that's listening, you're thinking to yourself, me impatient? That can never happen, right? Wow. I mean, it's totally shocking. But so I got really, really impatient. And then the wind had to be so perfect. And I'm like, does the wind really have to be perfect? People with parachutes, I mean, come on. And so by the end of it, I was like, let's do this darn thing. And it was so interesting to see myself kind of go through that evolution of fear in travel. But then we go and we run and jump off of this mountain, and kind of, he goes, all you have to do is just keep running, even if you're in the air. And I'm like, okay, kind of running my feet in the air, and it took off. And one of the things, this was in 2003. I know it's a really long time ago. One of the things that he said, even in 2003, of course, we didn't really have cell phones or anything like that were a problem, but I did have a camera, and he wouldn't let me take any pictures or do anything in that process. And I was I was really thankful for that, though, because it forced me to look around, and it forced me to look up and enjoy the moment, and to feel my fear, and to feel, my excitement and energy and all of that. And we crashed horribly onto the beach, but it was one of the best crashes ever. And I think that in that process of that, I really found myself, and I found a lot of me that I didn't know was there in my evolution of fear. And of course, you've seen a very firsthand next level of that with our disruption podcast with Shauna. That's like next level kind of thing. But nonetheless, travel, if I hadn't have been there, if I hadn't been in another country, all of those different components allowed me to have that experience. So I really want to dig into how travel can have this. What does that mean? A lot of experts like Dr. Wanda Krause has talked about transformational leadership and how travel helps with that, and how it really kind of broaden people to be more curious and to take risks and to be adaptable and resilient. And I really want to talk to a subject matter expert about what they think and how travel has impacted their life. So I'd like to use this opportunity now to introduce you to Mario Vega. Now, this individual I met in Kenya, Africa last year. absolutely beautiful soul. He's a risk and audit manager for Guadalupe Credit Union. He has a bachelor's in business from New Mexico State University. He's also a DE, so shout out to our DE friends. And he's a travel aficionado for sure. He has been around the block. And so I'd like to now, please join me in welcoming Mr. Mario Vega. Hello, Mario.
Hello, Brandi.
How are you?
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me here.
So we did first lay eyes on each other in Africa, right? In Kenya,
Yes.
in Nairobi.
Yes.
That's so cool.
I didn't know what I got myself into, and
both with
there I was.
Africa as well as me, right?
Right. Yeah. I especially that I forgot to take the malaria pills. I was like, I won't worry about those.
I remember us having that conversation. Actually, you're like, nah, I opted out of the malaria. I'm like, who opts out of malaria?
Yeah. I'm like, I'll be fine. I'll be all right.
So when it comes to how did you get your travel bug? When did that start? How did it start?
Well, I think as far as it goes back to when I was a kid, I always had the curiosity and love for planes. So in my mind, it always seemed like futuristic. So this was like in the early 90s. Most of the countries that I knew of were mostly countries that I had heard of from TVs or from news or just places that were just far away. The other thing too is I remember in class, like even in 5th grade, when they would tell us to write about yourself and what did you want to do when you grow up. And I remember always talking about like, I want to travel the world when I grow up.
Wow.
And I think this travel bug, that was the root of it. I didn't really travel then. I didn't have the opportunity as a kid. But when I met a friend in high school and she's Russian and she invited me. She's like, hey, my family wants to meet you. You should come to Russia for a summer. And that was my first actual overseas international trip.
No, it was not.
Month.
Russia?
After that, I was like, oh my God, this is it.
Russia was your first time abroad?
It was. Russia was my first time abroad. And let me tell you, it was an experience. It was a good experience, and I had some bad experiences, and it also made me grow as well as in my travels and understanding certain things about traveling.
Wow. Now, we may have some Russian listeners here, and they probably feel the same way if America was their first travel experience as well. But I've been to Russia, and it is far out and different and crazy. But to be the first, to be somebody that grows up, primarily in the U.S., and then to go to Russia for the first, no Canada. Like, you didn't just roll down to Tijuana for a weekend. No, you went to Russia.
Right.
Wow, that's insane. So what's the most important thing that you've learned in your journeys?
As far as the most important things, I would probably say learning about yourself. You actually don't realize how much you don't know about yourself until you travel alone and then spend so much time alone exploring new places. A lot of my travels I've actually done alone.
Have you?
I think it has helped me grow as an adult, as a human being, experiencing different cultures and different people. It definitely opens your mind. Every time I travel to a country that anyone rarely travels to, like, for example, you hear these places that nobody goes to. I always think of them as like the hidden gems, forgotten gems. Sometimes we just get caught up in our daily routine and we don't realize that there's a whole world out there for us to see.
Yeah. And so often people will be born, raised, die in the same place that they are and are just never exposed to anything beyond that.
Yeah. And the thing about this, Brandi, is it's in every part of the world. I studied abroad in Spain for 2 years. And when I was there, I lived in Sevilla, actually 1 year. And then the other year, I just thought I was going to live there forever until reality kicked in. I was 21 at the time, 22. But there was people there in villages that, they're like, oh, I've only been to Madrid, which is, the major city in Spain. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, you live in Europe and you've never been out of Spain. Like the farthest they've been was Madrid from Sevilla, which is like a 2-hour train ride on the bullet train or, mm-hmm. an hour flight. And that was the farthest. And even here in the States where I live in New Mexico, people that have only been to Denver, Phoenix. So, it's everywhere in the world. It's, mm-hmm. It can be, it's a little more difficult for developing countries, but even in a lot of these developed countries, you see a lot of people that have just never stepped out of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are some of your travel tips? What are some of the things that you what are your go-tos?
Well, one of the things that I definitely is don't overthink the traveling. I think the more you think about it, the more you worry.
Like, don't
And
worry
then you
about
become
malaria pills. I mean, I'm
right,
just
I think
going
so.
to Kenya.
I think so. I'm like, I'm not gonna worry about those. Because when you start thinking about this, I mean, you start setting yourself setbacks, and then you start worrying, and what if this happens? And it's just, I mean, I just feel like it's easy to take the easy steps. So everyone has the ability to do something big, such as traveling. The way that I always say is start small. So like if you feel a little uncomfortable, I would start slow, like maybe go to Spain, maybe go to the UK, maybe go to France, more developed countries. So when you get there, you don't feel as scared or out of your comfort zone. So it's like easy steps to take for traveling. Then you can step it up and then go to more developed countries or other places that you never thought you would ever actually make it to.
Well, that's a good point. So if people have the capacity to be able to go abroad and say they're from the United States, I agree with you. The best places to go are first places that speak English or whatever language that you speak, right? So whether it's Australia or Canada, those are easy ones. They're Western culture, English speaking,
Western, yeah.
United Kingdom. And then if you can, to other developing countries that maybe have different language, so that's kind of a next level, different language, but still are Western culture. And then when you start going into different languages where they don't speak as much English in the country, and then different alphabets, like Greece or anywhere in Asia or, those kinds, that takes it up a different level, because then you can't read maps or anything, right? And then
and
then the culture
and then
thing.
That's when it's totally, and then that's when you become a little more, if you have the experience, you're just like, oh, I got this. I think I can do this. And I've done this before. And surprisingly, even in developed countries and developing countries, I mean, you come across, there'll always be someone that will speak English. I think, the United States is, we focus on just the one language, but anywhere else in the world, I mean, you find people, even that lack the education that speak multiple language, and you're just so shocked. You're like, wow.
That's amazing.
I just met this kid in Cambodia and he can speak 3 languages. I'm like, wow, where did you learn that? And it's amazing.
It is amazing. So I started to ask you before the podcast, and now I want to officially ask you, how many countries have you been to?
34 different countries, 34 different countries. Yeah.
Wow.
And I feel like it's going to keep going and going and
going. The pace that you're going is going to continue to expand. And so I'm right with you. And the fact that you, first of all, started with saying that you grew up in the 90s, I know that you, that I now know that I have some years on you, which made me sweat a little bit. I am also about the same. I think maybe like 36, 37 or so. And it's hard, of course that includes Liechtenstein and the Vatican, and I'm going to include every single country that is actually there, but
true. And the Vatican is even its own country.
Yeah,
so
exactly. It does count. Yeah, it's on my list anyway. That's so cool. So where's the craziest place you've ever been?
Craziest? Well, as far as craziest, I would probably say because of the day that I arrived, what was happening. And I would probably say this was in Thailand. This was in Phuket, Thailand.
Wow.
So when I arrived in Phuket, this was in April. This was in 2016. And it was the celebration of the New Year. And the way that they celebrate the New Year, it's called Songkram. Songkram, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Songkram. And it's basically the beginning of the rainy season in April. So when I arrived there, it was like people were telling me, you just arrived for this huge festivity of the water festival for New Year's. I'm like, well, what is it about? So it's basically everyone out on the street throwing water at each other and just having fun. And the streets are very lively. Everyone is out having fun. The bars are full. And it was just so crazy because, I remember just seeing all these people and everyone just having fun. And it was like you could go to a bar and then just dump a bucket of water on someone, even if when they were having their drink, and it was all fun and stuff. I was like, wow, This is such a crazy event. Well, let me tell you, the next day was even crazier when you come across all these people passed out on the beach, I was like, oh my God, it was insane.
Wow.
It was like, wow, it was like The Hangover, except, yeah, it was kind of like The Hangover, the second one where they go.
And just go step right. And I couldn't imagine getting right off the plane to that too. And that's one of the things that I always do when I go to different countries is I try to at least have some place to go right off the plane. Like I want to know exactly how to get to my first place because that's usually the most overwhelming time is when you first are exposed to the new country. And then from there you can kind of loosen up and get into it and, you know, get a little bit more comfortable or adaptive and then figure your way out. But when you first step off the plane to step right into something like that would be intense. I'm going to Thailand this summer, actually. So
oh my God, you are gonna love it. You are gonna love it.
I'm hoping to have a bit of a hangover experience.
I'm sure you will.
We won't talk about which details go into that. So what are some things that you dislike the most when it comes to travel rookies? So I'm sure in your travels, you've seen people that are rookies and I can sniff them and see them from miles away. And I'm sure you can as well. What are some things that bug you about the travel rookie?
Yes, the travel rookie. Oh. Well, I mean, I think the number one thing that just is very hard is when someone is, with my experience, you know, I had actually a friend that, and we kind of lost touch, but I had a friend and seemed very outgoing, very open-minded, and in the perspective of being here, and then I just decided to throw, you know, the idea like, let's go on a trip. And I guess you don't really know somebody until you travel with them. That's one of the things they say, and especially international. But he was just very close-minded as far as being afraid to eat the food, as far as to get on, you know, certain things or explore ideas, or he would never bring in his ideas as far as things to do, or wanting to get on a little boat on a river cruise or something because afraid of the water was going to splash and he might get sick. And afraid to try the food. So that was a little a little frustrating for me. So, and I've come across that actually with some people, but you know, some people actually, the thing is like, you got to make them comfortable. Some people will get comfortable after a certain time and some people just won't. Like, they're just like, this is just not for me. And I made a mistake and maybe, you know, this was just not for me.
Right. Yeah. So I think you're right. So the biggest thing is people being open-minded. So coming into it, and it's because I'm happy to help somebody that it's their first time, to give them any sort of support that they want, love, look out for them, you know, take them under my wing. I'm happy to do any of that and would be here for anybody that it is a rookie. But if they come into it whining, or they come into it complaining or unwilling to try, then it's like, eh.
Yes. And then at that point, then you just feel responsible for the person. And I mean, it just makes the trip a little difficult for the both of you.
Tell me, what about packing? Are you an expert packer or are you an overpacker?
You know what? I would say I'm not so much of an expert packer because I'm just like, okay, so I pack like literally before the trip. So there's been times where my flight has been at 6 a.m. and here I am packing at 2:33 a.m.
Oh my gosh. So that,
but
I'm like the
I have not gotten anywhere and then where I've said, oh, I forgot this. Like for some reason it just
except malaria
natural.
Pills. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at that point I already knew, but I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about it.
Right.
Like, I just like, Right.
I'm like the super packer. So I remember going to China and I went for a couple weeks and I had just a carry-on because I wanted to be able to carry it on and didn't want to lose my bag going to China. And I knew that it'd be so different culturally that I didn't have to worry about having to buy things or anything like that. So I just carried on, piece of cake. 2 weeks is not that, you know. And there were people that brought suitcases upon suitcases. I'm like, first of all, you have to carry all of that. And secondly, like what it could possibly be in these suitcases. You know what I mean? So it just, sometimes when people overpack, I just like looking like,
Yeah. See, and that's one thing that I don't do. I don't think I ever feel like I overpack. And usually when I go on a trip, like this last trip, I went to Scandinavia and I went with my partner, Drew. And I felt like maybe I was a little overpacked. And the reason was because I just, you know, felt like, well, we're going to be, you know, driving around and, I felt more comfortable that I wasn't going to be carrying this stuff all around.
Right.
Rather than when I'm by myself, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be by myself and I'm going to be carrying all this stuff. I'm not going to have a car. So usually what I do is I take those big, huge, you know, backpacks and then I just roll my clothes and when I roll it, I just stuff it in there, and then everything just fits in there, and it's perfectly because then everything's all in my back.
So what advice do you have for people wanting to explore? What's an action or a takeaway?
Well, I mean, what I hear from a lot of older people, they're like, you're doing the right thing. Do it now, because that is one of the biggest regrets that I have is I've always wanted to travel, and now that I'm older, it's just not the same as if I would have done it at your age. So that is definitely one of the things to do, is to do it now. Also, you don't realize how educational and so much that you learn from traveling. You learn so much about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reward of traveling is just something hard to explain, of just because how it makes you feel, and how it just opens your mind, and it makes you realize that, wow, there's so much out there in the world. It's so hard to explain. One of the countries that ever did that to me was New Zealand. Like, I came back from that place and I was like changed. I know it sounds very dramatic, but It's true. Everyone even noticed. They're like, wow, after this trip, I was like, you've been so different. You've changed. But spending so much time by yourself, that's the biggest reward. You get to learn so much about yourself, and you're able to realize when you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, but at the same time you're aware of your own, I guess you would call it BS, and then you can call yourself out.
Yeah, you're aware of I'll say it, you're aware of your own bullshit, and you're aware of your own weaknesses, but you're also having to rely on yourself, and there's no one else to have your back but you, and that's a powerful thing in some of those moments, is just having to figure it out, to be near tears in an overwhelming situation, but having to go, hey, the only person that's getting me through this right now is me.
Just yourself. You had mentioned previously, Brandi, about another of the travel tips, and another one that I had was a lot of people exchange money at the exchange rates, cash places, and usually you get charged so many fees with that. And I've always told people this: the best rates you get at the ATM. The one thing is you got to notify, hopefully, your credit union and not a bank, because the credit union will be at the most $3 fee. And banks, you'll rank up to $20 fees. And I've had that from my past experiences. But you notify your credit union, you take out the money at the ATM, you will get the best exchange rates, and then you will save that commission fee that you usually pay at the exchange. So that's the best thing to do. And all the countries I've ever been to, I have not had a problem where I've just been like, I can't take money out of the ATM. Like, I've been able to. I mean, it goes from Cambodia to Thailand to Kenya, which are far more developing nations.
Awesome. That's a perfect takeaway. How can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
I do have my email, mariovga@gmail.com. You can send me a message on Facebook. I'm under Mario Vega Mendoza. I added the additional last name. It's a Mexican Hispanic thing. And also, I have my Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at Mario NYDV. That's Mario NY, D as in dog, and then V as in Victor. And you can see all my, usually whenever I travel somewhere, I post a picture of that place. I try to not overwhelm my Instagram, but I'm more of like thinking of what place really captured me at that city. So then I take a picture of that, and then that one goes on my Instagram.
Love it.
Facebook, I mean, on my Facebook, I have tons of albums. I have every single album of my travels. So, I mean, they're all sorted by different countries that I visited throughout my life.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today, Mario. I appreciate it. It's great to see you. And
it was good to see you.
I'll talk to you very soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, I am the sheriff. We are now in Budapest. I'm listening Brandi on Hotbox.
Thank you to our shout out from Budapest. Thank you to Mario as well. I love being able to have the global perspective here on the Strategic Hotbox. Here's your top 5 kick-ass. Number 1, when it comes to travel, sharpen that travel IQ. Do some research, know what you're doing, understand, watch, listen to the people that are around. That's the best part about getting to know and understanding. Also, listen to yourself. Number 2 is embrace the inspiration. Open your eyes, feel, listen to the music, smell the smells, be a part of the culture that you're in. Like I said, try to get lost a little. Number 3 is appreciate that diversity. Sometimes appreciating the diversity allows you to appreciate where you are at home and have a different contextual alignment about who you are and where you are. Number 4 is push beyond that comfort zone. So if you don't have the means to travel outside of your country, then push beyond your city, push beyond anywhere that you can. Whatever that comfort zone is, we urge you to push. And number 5 is create a global community. Whether you meet somebody in Africa and they become your friend and here on the Hotbox, or meet people all over the world, it's important to stay in touch, create those connections. That's part of travel. Create a community. There's your top 5. Kick ass. Thank you again to Mario and all of our Hotbox homies for being here and sending shout outs. Until next time, get out there and see the world and then kick some ass.